Pekka Ervast. Translated by Antti Savinainen and edited by Tim Wyatt. Literary Society of the Finnish Rosy Cross, 2025. Contents. Foreword. First, introduction. Second, the magic of life experiences. Third, the trial of earth. Fourth, the trial of fire. Fifth, the trial of water. Sixth, the trial of air. Seventh, the secret school of life. Foreword. What is the source of real wisdom? Does it lie way out there in the great beyond somewhere, or is it concealed deep within us waiting to be liberated? Many esoteric thinkers have asserted that wisdom and enlightenment are slumbering in each and every one of us. Many, including the Finnish writer Pekka Ervast 1875 to 1934, broadly concur with this view. Ervast was a towering and influential figure in the Theosophical movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He joined the Swedish Theosophical Society in 1895 and founded the Finnish Theosophical Society Suomen Teosofinen Seura in 1907. Ervast also held the role of Chief Secretary from 1907 until 1917 and edited the journals Omatunto between 1905 and 1907 and Tietaja from 1908 until 1920. When the Finnish society split up 1920, he founded Ruusu Risti Society and the journal Ruusu Risti. Remarkably, the works themselves and their clarity of language and expression remain as fresh and vibrant today as they did a century ago, presented in an easy-to-understand style and offering practical solutions to the thorny problems of life. The School of Temptations is based on a series of lectures given by Ervast in Helsinki in the autumn of 1927. It is effectively a manual for self-initiation, initiation being elevation into higher states of consciousness and deeper levels of spiritual understanding. However, as all spiritual aspirants are well aware, initiation only comes after prolonged struggles, bitter disappointments, and what the co-founder of the Theosophical Society Helena Blavatsky called self-devised efforts. In this book, Ervast portrays this difficult process as a series of trials by earth, by fire, by air, and by water. He explains how these trials are accompanied by their own series of temptations and offers a route map to negotiate a way through these mighty challenges. With a strong background in esoteric Christianity, Ervast was one of a long and illustrious line of spiritual pioneers whose role was to reinterpret the timeless truths of the perennial philosophy down the ages. His key messages continued to reverberate a century after they were first imparted because wisdom itself always continues to reverberate and illuminate, even in times of peril, lies, and darkness. The differences in location and era never fully mask the stupendous power and inestimable value of these eternal cosmic laws which govern ourselves and everything else in the infinity and eternity of the universe. These laws transcend both time, space, and the material world we occupy. They are the eternal dynamics of life. Tim Wyatt, Bingley, West Yorkshire, England. Chapter 1. Introduction. It is said that when the Buddha had attained all wisdom and knowledge, he looked at the earth and became sad. He had thought that having found the truth he would tell others about it, but as he looked at the world he found that it did not need his truth. Then the Buddha hesitated and thought, "Shall I withdraw from the world of men into some dark forest, even darker than where I have been, or shall I leave this life altogether? After all, I have gained power over life and death, and I may die out of this world altogether." But the legend goes on to say that the Most High God from heaven came to him and prayed that he would not cast off humankind, but would remain with people because there were always those who sought the truth. Go out and speak to them, for although the world as a whole is not ripe to receive the message of truth, there are still living and longing souls out there. Then the Buddha cast aside his doubts and hesitations and entered the world. Over several decades, as he wandered around India preaching his great message, he found tens of thousands of people listening to him and gratefully accepting his revelation of the great purpose of existence. When one looks at life around, one can observe that people are wholly and exclusively caught up in their business, work and tasks. All this is necessary because life has placed the tasks before people, and everyone must perform their duties. However, life would become too heavy for them in this way if they did not have something to do in their leisure time to refresh their minds. That's why people in big cities amuse themselves a lot. They go to amusements that enhance the mind, soul and spirit, as well as lighter concerts, theatres, circuses, night cafes, etc. People seem to get something out of such amusements, but they seem to be more forgetful than refreshed by their souls. The amusements do not elevate their spirits, but they forget their daily troubles and are better able to endure their labours and duties. There is a feeling or aura in the big cities that our physical life is the great reality. How about time for thinking, for philosophy? For someone involved in real life, philosophy is a waste of time. If by nature one doesn't long for amusements, or if one is old and doesn't long for them anymore, there's religion, masses and services. Even there you can forget about the troubles and sorrows of life. People don't have much time for thinking. They don't care much for truth. That is the impression one can get in big cities. Then one feels insignificant and useless in this life, because a person who has sought and is seeking the truth with all his soul and with all his mind would like every person to say to themselves, "Now I want to look at life from eye to eye. Now I want to see what life is. Now I want to know why there are sorrows and worries and why even joy and amusement seem empty." But since people don't ask themselves this, it seems pointless to the seeker of truth to offer them solutions and answers they have neither sought nor longed for. That's the kind of hesitation a thinker can get into. However, a moment's reflection brings another side of the issue to his mind. Reality is not only the everyday world in which we live at the moment, but also something else. A little over 10 years ago in 1914, the reality here in Europe was quite different. Back then, life did not call to amuse people. It invited them to make the ultimate sacrifices, self-forgetfulness, suffering and pain. Then the World War raged, and the existence was dark for everyone. It was then that many people felt that life was not an everyday existence, but was so hard, mysterious and absurd that they were forced to ask themselves what it was all for. At such moments in human and individual history, one can become a seeker of truth. One can become one, but not everyone does. Not everyone has the moral strength to do so. People are affected differently by hardship and suffering. Some seek oblivion after great and distressing times, or fierce amusements to escape the call of reason. On the other hand, some awaken to more profound thought. And those who wake up thinking prove to the seeker of truth that all is not lost. The human race is not lost. There are the righteous among people. And just as the Buddha in the legend observes, although humankind does not yet greatly desire truth, some individuals do seek it. The truth seeker feels a new life being born in oneself and a new power flooding one's soul. And one thinks, since I have been privileged to see the divine light of truth, I am anxious to tell it to others, for there are souls who long for that light and gladly receive it. Chapter 2: The Magic of Life Experiences. We talk about life's experiences and trials, often also the school of life. Why shouldn't we, therefore, also speak about the trials that life puts before us? We do not need to imagine life as a personal, perhaps diabolical creature that deliberately teases and tests us. Life's experiences may be objective, fair, systematic and purposeful trials. In what follows, we will hopefully come to understand this. Tests or trials are frequently mentioned in discussions about intellectual, moral, or spiritual aspirations and in the pursuit of knowledge. In secret societies such as Freemasonry, one does not become a member, one does not attain initiation, as they say, until one has passed the prescribed trials well and competently. In our daily life, the same method prevails. We can't get into any school, college, or government office unless we pass some tests. We can't get a job or a position in the community unless we can show by some test that we are capable of the job or position we seek. Therefore, we are no strangers to this idea of trials and how to conduct them. In the old days, even in secret societies, one had to take exams before becoming a student, which seems quite natural to us. It is with the greatest interest that we read, for example, in the ancient Egyptian mysteries that before one could meet the hierophants who held a school in the pyramid, one had to pass a series of challenging trials. If one failed, one remained a slave or servant in the pyramid forever. Only those who succeeded and were initiated into the brotherhood could enter the world to carry out their duties. Now we modern people feel that they were relatively childish, or could only be shocked if the aspirants knew nothing about them beforehand. They were therefore kept strictly secret. We know little about them from the stories and references of the Greek authors. There were 4 types of these trials: earth, fire, water, and air. They were all designed to test the aspirant's courage, endurance, and cold-bloodedness. The earth trial, for example, involved a difficult crawl in hopelessly long underground tunnels where aspirants could neither stand up nor turn around, but had to crawl inch by inch in total darkness, completely unaware of what might be coming. Suddenly, a bottomless chasm opened up in front of them, making it impossible to move forward. Now I can't crawl anymore, there's nothing there. What am I going to do? We can understand that those who complete their trials, passing through the fire, swimming in the water and falling in the air, have shown resourcefulness and courage. They have the presence of mind, the confidence and the faith. The trials tested their strength. But if it were like this in our time, we would feel that the aspirant now, having passed the trials, would have no right to think anything of themselves. It would all be theatre. However, some secret societies still use outward trials, which put aspirants' courage and resolution to a severe test. Still, if the aspirant successfully carries out such a trial, it is, in our opinion, a petty and insignificant game. There can be no real value in such tests. The modern person knows this instinctively. But at the same time, as a thoughtful seeker of truth, one asks in wonder, what is the purpose of such trials in the secret societies where the aim is moral and spiritual development? If, as seems to be the case, there have been wise people in secret societies worldwide, what has been the reason they have organized such trials? In our schools and universities, tests are used, but these tests are primarily or almost exclusively of an intellectual nature. Why have mystery societies set up trials that test and torment aspirants morally and spiritually? There must be a reason behind it. There must have been a valid motive for those wise people and sages to have arranged such a thing. Or was it just that, as free people, they didn't want just anyone to join their organization? In that case, their brotherhood would not have been important. It would just have been a common game, even if it did play with moral values. No, they have had a broader vision. They have pursued universal values aimed at something universal. Their inspiration has come from above. Their sage status required them to possess all the virtues. Their wisdom had been achieved in moral victories. As sages, they lived in the light and were surrounded by the darkness of the human world. They lived an eternal life while other people were in the grips of death. But they wanted to help their brothers who were wandering in the darkness. They tried to open the way to life and light for them. They wanted to educate them and teach them to strive morally. And since life was only accessible through a narrow gate, the wise helpers did not invent anything of their own accord, but set up the restricted entrance and the narrow way for the aspirants to see. And in all those trials, narrow gates and narrow paths were then metaphors of life. And now a new question arises. What is life? Is life a school? What school is it then? In what way is the school organized? Is life as a school organized in such a way that it can be symbolized in some trials, so that those who take these tests can understand what trials and experiences they have to go through in life? Have these earth, fire, water and air trials, which have always been used in secret societies, really been symbolic representations of life itself? From modern theosophical literature, we read that trials performed in pyramids and ancient initiation places, and in some modern societies as metaphors, are conducted in the so-called astral world while the physical body is asleep. When we walk outside our bodies at night, while our bodies are sleeping in their beds, we can perform these earth, fire, water and air trials when we are inclined to do so. We perform the earth trial by practically learning to move in our invisible body in the physical world. We learn that solid ground and solid objects must not impede our path. We walk through walls and ceilings, step inside rocks to see the life of trolls, etc. We take the trial of fire in the astral body knowing that we cannot be affected by the physical phenomenon of fire. For example, we are standing on the edge of a volcano and our astral teacher says to us, "Jump into that crater." How scared we are, even though we are in another state. At first it feels terrifying to jump into Vesuvius, but experience must be gained, and the element of fire must be overcome. In the same way, we get to do the water trial. Into the depths of the sea we must plunge as if the water were pure air, and in the air trial we must learn to fly without wings and an airship. We can read in modern theosophical books that these are the element-based trials performed in the invisible astral world. At the same time, the body is asleep, and as seekers after truth we ask, are these astral tests the earth, fire, water and air trials which the old sages wanted to simulate by external trials, crawling, swimming and so on? Not at all, answer the wise. Those astral tests are only symbols, symbolic trials in the world of dreams. They do not require or cultivate anything but courage, determination and mental fortitude, the same as physical trials. In themselves they are not the trials of earth, fire, water and air that life puts us through. All such things are symbolic, real in their way, but still spiritually symbolic. The trials which life demands before it ordains one as a self-conscious citizen of life, a member of the kingdom of God, and before those who represent life, the great white brotherhood, ordain one as their acknowledged brother, are different. Having passed the external tests, we can understand what life expects. So we now turn to the tests of life itself, in other words, the school of life's temptations. If life is a school, that is, if life educates us and makes us undergo specific tests, then it is undoubtedly helpful for us to understand the procedures of school of life, not to mention the fact that understanding itself will bring us joy and happiness, will be good and beneficial to ourselves and others if we do not resist the educational methods of life, if we do not grumble, shout or complain but willingly submit to schooling, guidance and discipline. This is the passive benefit of understanding. On the other hand, we can actively help life. Instead of saying to life, "Grow me," and then becoming lazy, we can say, "I want to help you if I can." After all, it is my human freedom that I can be inspired by life's method of education. I can accept it in my spirit. I want to learn as much as possible, educate myself and imitate life. What kind of self-education would that be? Going in a different direction from where life takes you. It could take you in a crazy direction. To go the right way, we need to understand life's method of education. Then, we can further our development, grow ourselves as free beings and make life's work a little easier. What have all the wise done down the ages? Exactly this. That's why the Great White Brotherhood exists. They try to awaken people through religions and other movements. One is called to participate in the divine work, not oppose it. We humans can educate ourselves by helping our fellow human beings. We can become sons and daughters of life and be a source of happiness and joy in this world, which is, at its base, a spiritual reality. Just as we who feel ourselves corporeal beings are, in reality, spiritual beings, life is a great spiritual world. Let us therefore rise to an awareness of what we as human beings are capable of. Chapter 3. The Trial of Earth. When we call life a school, such a definition should not seem so alien, since religions have always pointed out something of the sort. It is true that Christianity in most of its churches is accustomed to thinking of life as a valley of sorrows, but the concept of valley of sorrows has been understood as a preparatory school. For having lived our time in this valley of sorrows, we are, according to the ecclesiastic faith, prepared for eternal life. Our present life is therefore of particular importance, because our eternal future depends on it. Life from this point of view becomes a very important school. This has been instinctively recognized by the churches, who have tried to make school a little easier by inventing the doctrine of the atonement of the Son of God, the Saviour, so that all a person needs to do is to have faith to be prepared in this life for eternal life. That faith was then given a different definition in different churches. In the Protestant Church it has been so refined that it cannot include good works. As in the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church has called good works self-righteousness. In the Protestant Church, faith is the only way to salvation. Christian churches have been forced into that definition of life as a school by not accepting the doctrine of reincarnation. In the first centuries, when the Gnostics were still true Christians, life was seen as a school in the sense that people as spiritual beings were born again and again on earth and continued to develop and work here until they could finally embrace the Christ life completely so that, as the Apostle Paul said, Christ lived in them. They no longer lived as ordinary human beings. Such was the doctrine before, and we remember from church history that the Council of Constantinople condemned the doctrine of reincarnation as false only in 553. In the light of reincarnation, it is easy for us to understand life as a school, and while most people in Christendom now do not believe in reincarnation, they generally believe that life is a school. On the other hand, some people outside the faith do not want to admit this. Should I call them thoughtless? They don't think we should define life in any way. They say, every human being has a clear desire to be happy, so happiness is the goal of life. They are looking for all the fun and good things in life, but when disappointed they easily snap. Life is a whimsical institution, it makes no sense. Others think life is an excellent adventure, in which we all participate and try to get along as best we can. I think it is beautiful to call life an adventure. And why not say that the school of life is like an adventure, as long as we understand that life is a school after all? Those who are a little wiser in life can answer from experience that in this school, a person's happiness comes naturally if one is only a diligent student. But if one rebels against the order of the school, one will never be at peace. Now, as we look at life as a school, we must first make clear to ourselves what kind of beings we are as humans who attend this school. We do not have to look far for an answer to this. We can settle for the old and universally accepted definition. When we examine ourselves, we see that we are I beings living in contact with two realities, external and internal. Our I being is part visible or corporeal life, and part invisible spiritual life. This does not deny that we are corporeal beings, but at the same time we live invisible lives because as conscious beings we know, feel and will. As knowing, feeling and willing beings we manifest our soul life in visible, corporeal form. Our physical body is one thing, but another is our consciousness in the soul, which is knowing, feeling and willing. In distinguishing between the two, we usually say that our body is an objective reality and our soul is a subjective reality. But to understand the wise point of view, we must ask ourselves, isn't this soul world also objective? For it is an objective, external reality in the eyes of the wise. And this is not impossible to grasp if we remember that we ourselves are not the same as, for example, a feeling or a thought in us. We say, I feel anger or hatred, but we do not say, I am anger or hatred. When we remember that our I being is our real self, we can say that our feelings and knowledge are objective to us and outside of us, in fact, realities in the spirit world, as the wise say. We see this most clearly in our thoughts. We think, for example, of a beautiful landscape. We know that we remember it, but is that image non-existent? It can't be non-existent because it's right in our soul's eyes. No doubt there is thus a world of thought, populated by thought images that are themselves real, some ephemeral and powerless, others powerful, perhaps eternal. Perhaps some people can see those things that are invisible to others. This is not difficult to grasp if one thinks logically. For example, someone may suddenly have a strange premonition or information about something happening elsewhere. Where does it come from if no such image exists in someone else's consciousness? Telepathy is a recognized natural phenomenon. A human being is like a radio, both receiver and transmitter. And so is every conscious being, both here and in the spirit world. As I beings, we are thus educated in a world that is partly invisible and partly visible but equally real in both respects. Last time we discussed the trials used in various secret schools, which have been called earth, fire, water and air trials, according to the elements. This designation of the elements is ancient. Our modern science does not accept it. There are many more elements. However, the ancient peoples spoke of the four elements in another, broader sense, and we still use these terms in everyday language. Everybody knows what earth is, what water is, etc. But it must be borne in mind that when the ancient peoples, taught and guided by the sages, used these names, they did not mean only the visible, physical elements, but used them to describe both the visible and the invisible world. They use them to describe the worlds we, as human beings, are in contact with. By earth, they described this visible life, but water, air and fire represented the invisible life, the objective world in which we as spiritual beings are members. They distinguished three different aspects of it: water, air and fire. All modern theosophical books refer to the fact that element names can be used for the soul worlds. The world of feeling is usually described as water, corresponding to the element of water. The world of thought corresponds to the air element, and the world of will to the fire element. This is the kind of division we see in the theosophical books. This division does not remain the same when we turn to the secret schools. In the mystery and esoteric societies we find that there is a fire, water and air trial after the earth trial. Fire describes the emotional world, the astral world, in these secret schools. For this particular purpose, fire is the most natural name for the emotional world regarding these trials. That's why the earth and fire trials are taken together in the mysteries, then the water and air trials. However, we shall see that the fire element is most suitable for the second trial. The first test is therefore the earth trial. It is easy to understand that it has to do with the physical world and our physical bodies, not exclusively of course, because as humans, we are conscious I beings, including all the different worlds. We are the solution to the problem. The soul and the body are fused in us. It is natural, therefore, that in the trials of the school of life we should be wholly involved, but that in each trial the emphasis should be on the element at hand. In the earth trial, the focus of our life training is on the visible body, and it is the visible life and the physical body that puts us to the test. All people are put to the earth trial, and some souls have passed the test. As humanity, we have to deal with other trials simultaneously, but that is the focus when we are in the middle of an earth trial. We only really move on to the fire trial when we have completed the earth trial, at least to such an extent that we can turn our attention to the fire trial. However, the further we go in the history of human development, the more we see that humans are primarily set on the earth trial. So what is this earth trial? Life asks us, how do you relate to this physical life on earth and your physical body? How do you cope in these circumstances? If we consider the early history of humankind, not the so-called paradise state, but the early history of our race as known to science, then we find that nature asked, how are you going to get along in this world? One had to exert strength to survive, perform all sorts of acts and participate in the great struggle for existence, to which all living things are subjected. Life has therefore immediately placed people in school, and in the middle of the earth trial. The more the human race has developed, the higher cultures have arisen, the more the original conditions have become complex, but still the earth trial is before all. People have indeed formed civilized societies, born of the instinctive feeling and knowledge that it is easier to master the forces of nature together than alone. Hence, they have tried together to solve the earth trial, for this develops human intelligence, and as the intelligence develops, a division of labor is created, and an ordered society is formed. We could say, paradoxically, that our present bourgeois society is the school where we are in the earth trial. The question of coping is as clear and practical in our society as it was in the past, even though it has taken on new and more complex forms, and has acquired a symbol like the key to a secret. What is this symbol? It is gold, usually money. We are dealing with money when we take the earth trial, which focuses on how we relate to money. This curious fact is because bourgeois society rests on the principle of property rights. Property rights are sacred. In the beginning it was a right of use, for example, to the products of the land that one cultivated, but soon it was combined with the concept of ownership of the whole field. Then property rights were extended to include land in general, the forest that grows by itself, and even air and water, which were not touched by human hands at the time of creation. We have noticed that we do not know how to change property rights, still less their naturally evolved expressions in society. The principle is deep within us, lasting as long as we go to school for the earth trial, and money is now the symbol of the earth trial, and we will have passed that test once and for all, only when we have solved the meaning of gold. Our schooling is not easy because the validity of a class certificate depends on its ethical marks. In the school of life, morality is always put to the test, Even in the earth trial, we may develop wrong qualities before we realize what is right. The downside is that a temptation strongly attracts the heart of humanity in the earth trial. What is this wrong side, this sin as religion says, in the earth trial? It is cunning, theft, robbery, plunder, etc. Some people have developed a sense of adventure and strain their intellect to find ways to get hold of what others have accumulated. Some think it's wrong for some to have a lot, and others nothing. I'll take it and share it with everyone. Many of us have thought as children, I want to be a robber who helps people, and many of us have had our hearts beating with the memory of Rinaldo Rinaldi and Robin Hood. Once the problem of gold or wealth is solved in the future, society will be structured differently. Then there will be no need to develop the intellect for cunning and theft, but as long as these qualities are developed in the school of life, we must learn to distinguish between right and wrong and to think that theft is always theft. So, what is the solution to the earth trial? We have passed the earth trial when we are rich as poor and poor as rich. Gold reveals its secrets when our hearts are no longer attached to gold. And what have we learned in the school of life that has enabled us to pass the earth trial? We have learned the value of work, the necessity of work. And work is not just about doing things with your hands, it's brain work. The more difficult the work of the hands becomes, the more the worker exerts their brain, the more one has to be human. This is what one has learned in the course of one's life, if one has passed the earth trial, the necessity of work, and not wanting to possess anything wrongly. In the end, one is poor by choice. The greatest spiritual heroes of all time, such as Buddha and Jesus, lived in voluntary poverty. In doing so, they owned the whole world. They have been rich in their poverty but also poor in their wealth. If such a person were rich, they would be poor. Few people have passed the trial of the earth as a whole, but those on the road to final achievement are willing to work and earn honestly, or who are willing to use their riches for the benefit of the world, for the furtherance of development. For worldly wealth does not come only by working. Human intelligence and the good fortune of nature, that is karma, always play a part in creating wealth. It is not correct to think that wealth always comes the wrong way. The person to whom wealth comes has struggled in previous lives, so life now may test one in a new way by saying, how can you behave as a rich person? And if one has not prepared in their former lives, then one will waste their money on extravagance, inviting the frivolous world to amuse them. One instinctively feels in their soul that one does not know how to deal with wealth correctly. One wants to get out of it, and very soon one is poor again. But a person who has learned something keeps their temper, reason, and thoughts. One is a morally responsible being who must feel in their heart, I am accountable to life, to my conscience, to my higher self, to Christ, for all that I have. Chapter 4. The Trial of Fire. We will gain a clearer understanding of the trials of the school of life if we think of a life with no trials whatsoever. That kind of life existed in the distant past of humankind. We have all been in the kindergarten of the school of life, so to speak, when we were not yet put to the actual trials. It is difficult to say how long such a period lasted, for the school of life began relatively soon, through the medium of the trials. In any case, in the ancient traditions there are memories of a time when there were no trials in physical life, and no people who were in the school of life. It is expressed in their descriptions of the afterlife. Ancient Greeks and Finns describe life after death as bleak and dry. The former said they preferred to live on earth as beggars rather than in Hades as kings, because, as our Finnish ancestors believed, Hades was monotonous, grey and dreary. This is make-believe, says someone who does not believe in life after death, but experts know and acknowledge that there have been times in the world when people's afterlife was nothing but dreary, empty and grey. Even now there are people who, beyond the grave, spend some time leading a dull and monotonous life. They have had no interest in life. They have slept, eaten, grown, worked, married. It has all happened as if by nature. They have thought nothing of it. When they enter the afterlife, such people continue their former corporeal life, being in the same conditions in their minds. They eat, drink, work and sleep. They have a spouse and a home, but their life in Hades is beginning to feel bleak. Why? Because nothing satisfies them anymore. On earth they ate to satisfy their hunger and drank to quench their thirst, but now they feel no satisfaction from eating, and do not quench their thirst by drinking. They work without getting paid or needing to be paid, since they come by it anyway. They are married but they have no children. They look back on their life on earth, see the contrasts, realize that they are in the land of the dead, and think, existence is a dreary thing. This idea that existence is dreary and monotonous is their first achievement in the school of life. Born again into life, they bring that sense of boredom and gradually learn in life on earth that boredom, dreariness can be overcome. For if we imagine a person going through the earth trial, that person would discover that work can give happiness, variety and satisfaction to their life. Work is at first simple, then as constantly evolving artistic work. Subsequently, a longing for beauty is awakened. If we ask sociologists and archaeologists who study the early history of humankind, we learn that artistic pursuits arise as a matter of course in human beings. Art raises work to a more spiritual level. We all know that we can face similar problems, albeit for different reasons. We may have led life with so much fun and amusement that life becomes dry, dreary and monotonous in the end. Then a faint voice inside us tells us, get to work and do something and all the unhappiness will disappear. As I said, human beings are not so one-dimensional. We are much more complex, spiritual and physical. In fact, we live in 4 worlds, for our soul body is, so to speak, triple. We feel, know and will. And because we as spirit beings combine those opposites, body and soul, we live simultaneously in the physical body and the 3 veils of the spirit, usually called the soul bodies. These 4 veils or principles correspond to the 4 trials. The earth trial deals with the physical body, and now we come to the first part of our soul body, that part of ourselves that is called feeling and sensing, and formerly the emotional or astral body. It has to do with the trial of fire. We are not long in the school of life before we are thrown into the trial of fire. Already in the early stages of physical existence, a process occurs in the human soul, for one discovers that some things give them pleasure and enjoyment. In contrast, others are repugnant, causing pain and suffering. Let us think of a person who eats and drinks. As long as one is a sober and healthy person, one does not attach any special importance to eating and drinking. But there comes a time when one finds that one likes a particular food or drink better than another, because it gives one direct pleasure. Then one begins to seek it out. While one has not yet experienced the dangers of eating or drinking, one enjoys that food or drink to the extent that a reaction is produced in their body. It can no longer digest too much food, it becomes ill. Humankind's diseases were born from this type of cause. Many thinkers argue that we have corrupted ourselves by eating and drinking. But eating and drinking are not the only pleasures and pains. There are other possibilities of pleasure and suffering in the emotional soul. Above all, one has a remarkable faculty, which scholars call the faculty of continuance of the lineage, for there are thoughtful people who maintain that human sexuality is there for that very reason. And on the face of it, this fact cannot be denied. Just as eating exists so that the individual may survive, so sexual life exists so that humankind may physically survive on Earth. Yet this is a theoretical view. The reality is that eating, by becoming a sensual pleasure, has refined the person differently and has made one a new kind of being. One is now a cultural being who chooses their food. The whole organism has evolved using that sensibility which arose from the fact that one began to enjoy and suffer. The nervous system has spread its wonderful network of electrical wires throughout the body, penetrating even the smallest members. What an immense potential for feeling pleasure and pain in the body! We must not underestimate its sensuality and its importance in the history of human evolution. We are too prone to judge these things from an exclusively moral point of view, forgetting that the moral point of view is too often our own, but not that of life. The reality is that life's moral yardstick is both more austere and higher than ours, but it is not one-sided. Therefore, the philosophical viewpoint that maintains human kinship only for the continuation of the family is certainly one-sided. Our sexuality is a force of nature which has the greatest significance for our psychological development. That is what throws us into the deepest hell and casts us into the highest heaven. It makes us groan with pain and sing with happiness. It makes us poets and artists. And without it, where would our capacity for love be? Of course, divine love is the inner life of our spirit, but through our physical bodies and soul veils our inner capacity for love is brought to light by the most profound experiences through the bitter school of life. Human sexuality is the cause of almost all the suffering humanity has ever endured. Sexuality is a crucial issue for young people. It makes them wonder. Does one have to satisfy it, and in what way? Is it to be satisfied exclusively in marriage, or can it be satisfied in other ways? Marriage, it seems, often adds to the pain of the world. The young of our time are no longer ignorant. They no longer believe, as they once did, that marriage is the paradise on earth to which everyone must aspire. Sexuality is such a significant problem in itself that for most young people the question remains whether marriage will solve it. I'm just stating the facts. Sexuality is an infinite dilemma in human life. It causes tremendous pain and, in some cases, great upswings. As old and weary individuals, let us not forget what we knew so well in our youth. The trial of fire deals with our emotional and sensory bodies, our sensory faculties and our inner feelings. It is a trial by fire because, as the Apostle Paul says, a spiritual fire tests everything, in which all that is not eternal burns. We know from theosophical books or experience that the so-called hells and purgatories in the afterlife came into operation when humans in this earthly life began to enjoy with the help of their physical body. Even if one were healthy so that one did not have to suffer the painful consequences of pleasure in their physical life, we know that one was, in any case, subjected to the purgatory of purification after death. To the extent that one had enjoyed without suffering, one suffered where the fire of life burned them. This moral purifying fire of nature is seen and felt later in physical life. It is in this fire that most people spend their time. The test of fire is first carried out in hell and purgatory, but later those purgatories and hells are transferred to physical life. It is correct to say that one carries shell in one's bosom. Therefore, there is hardly a single person who is healthy from the cradle to the grave. Most people are prone to disease. Most people also suffer in this physical life from their sexuality, because sexuality is a problem that is thrown in their way from early youth. So we are caught in the fire in this visible life, and that is the state I think most people are in. And those people for whom sexuality has become a problem in this present life are in the midst of what is called a trial by fire. When we go through our earth trial, we have all kinds of experiences. We can take misguided steps with ownership, poverty and wealth. Whoever has finally completed the earth trial is neither poor nor rich. That individual has risen above the opposites and is the master of money, for gold is dust to them. One does not own anything even as a rich person. One is only the housekeeper because the world is theirs anyway. The earth trial has a high ideal, a goal which is achieved through intermediate stages and a wide range of smaller experiences. The same goes for the trial of fire. In that trial too, there is a goal to be achieved and a path to be followed. So, what is the ideal towards which the fire trial takes us? It is complete independence from all sensory and emotional life, complete self-satisfaction and purity. Our ideal is purity, and if we are clear about this, that life wants to teach us through the trial of fire absolute purity in every respect, then it is relatively easy to solve the practical questions and problems that arise. They must always be solved so that they point towards purity and make us move towards the ideal of purity. The chances of error and failure are great as in the trials of fire as in the earth trial. Let one who stands see that one does not fall. But the path of the sinner is lit by the star of hope, and if there are falls along the way, there are rises. In the shadows we learn to know the light, and the school of life teaches us by contrasts. The living features of the ideal must not be distorted into the cold face of judgment. If we have understood that, the perfect is pure, let us not judge those who are not yet willing to be pure. Judging does not solve the problems of life. The solution is found by saying to ourselves and others, there is the ideal, go towards it, see what light it creates, and let the glory of the light illuminate your difficulties. Then the light that comes from purity will illuminate the question and solve it at the same time. That every dilemma must be solved in this way is a practical truth. There is no single solution. The school of life is not like that. Life educates us, but it educates us in freedom. In the fire of suffering, it purifies us and makes us straight. Thus, we become wise. We learn to discern what is right, what is wrong, what is bad, and what is good. That is what we learn, and we can rejoice and be thankful. That's the kind of school we can rejoice in. One does not want to be good out of fear and compulsion, but with all one's heart, one wants to be good for its own sake, when the ideal of good becomes clear. Life allows us to do as we wish, but also lets us bear the consequences. We cannot avoid them. We are free to do what we do, but the results of our actions follow us. What one sows, one reaps. The school of life is a school of trials and temptations. Above all, the trials of earth and fire make us think and ask questions. Chapter 5. The Trial of Water. We could also call the trials in the school of life temptations. Temptation is a familiar word that is often used in Christianity. In the Lord's Prayer, we already pray, "Lead us not into temptation." If we now call the trials of life temptations, we can define what we mean by temptation, for we cannot think of the trials of life as natural temptations from which we should pray to God to save us. The trials of life belong to life itself. Otherwise, our lives would not be the same as they are now, so they are good in themselves, not evil. Let us look at this with respect to the trials we have just studied. The earth trial is a temptation, because the physical world and our physical bodies tempt us. After all, it attracts our attention and promises us something. Isn't this whole physical life of ours whispering in the tempter's voice, "Worship me, and I will give you all the riches of this earth, and you shall have dominion over all the wonders of this world"? The temptation is not that it tests us and cultivates us, but the temptation is that it can draw too much of our attention to itself. Reason tells us that to some extent we must serve the visible world, as if to adore the beautiful earth, cultivating and adorning it and conforming to the demands of the elements. Otherwise, we would not even survive. Such service is natural, but it becomes a temptation if we fall on our knees before the visible world, surrendering to worship it, and seeing in it the only wonder of which we know anything. Such a temptation leads us to philosophical materialism, to the denial of a divine life that we cannot see with our eyes or touch with our hands. We become God deniers in the philosophical sense. Our bodies and the visible world so blind us that we forget even the search for divine truth. This philosophical materialism is not the same as practical selfishness and viciousness. This materialism can be benevolent, even if that person has become entrenched in the visible reality. This is a relatively mild evil to our human eyes. Still, from the point of view of the spirit world, it is clear that the materialist separates themselves from the life of the spirit, and their inner being, by looking only at this visible mortal world. When we open our eyes to see the spirit, we do not fall into the temptation of the earth trial. But if we think of the trial by fire, it elevates us, as we have just said, to become spiritual beings. Neither our senses nor our emotions were ready from the beginning of humanity. Over long periods they have gradually evolved historically. Life offers all kinds of opportunities for our senses to develop, and at the same time, our emotions develop, become richer and more expansive. All this is necessary, and we must learn to pass the trials of fire. We are only tempted by the trials if we live so fully in our senses and emotional lives that they can whisper to us as a temptation, "Worship me, and I will bring you happiness." The phrase "worship me" then means, develop your capacity for sensual pleasure and concentrate entirely on the pleasure of the senses. Worship, and you will be happy. If we let it have its way, this temptation will lead us to so-called practical materialism, to hedonism, according to which we should enjoy life as much as possible, because sensual pleasure is life's content and purpose. The same temptation leads to Pharisaism, if, for example, for social reasons we admit the need for some ethical norms, in which case we try to appear morally exemplary on the surface, even if we secretly worship the god of pleasure. This is where the trial of fire leads us if we allow it to become a temptation. When Jesus taught us to pray, "Lead us not into temptation," he undoubtedly meant, Do not let our minds and intellects be blinded so that we do not see the living spirit, but think life is in physical possessions or sensual pleasures. Let us now move on to the so-called water trial. Since all the tests in the school of life are limitless, the thought work that is aroused in us as we perform the earth and fire trials throws us into the middle of the water trial. The water trial is in contact with our soul's thought body, with that invisible aspect of our being called the mental body or veil. We are put to the trial when, to a greater or lesser extent, we become thoughtful seekers of truth who consider the critical fact that humans are rational beings. Plants and animals can feel, but where is the free-thinking capacity? It remains hidden, if it exists. A human being is the only one who thinks with certainty and freedom. Humans differ from the rest of nature in that they are rational beings capable of thought, whose reason demands truth, understanding, and knowledge. When life experiences start to annoy us, one asks, why? One does not understand that life is a school. One does not understand that joys and sorrows, pleasures and sufferings are all at the same time trials. One loses their fortune or honor or someone dear and asks life, what for? How often do father and mother ask when their little child dies after suffering great pains, why should a small innocent child suffer so much? How can God allow such a thing to happen? The recent World War I made people ask if there is a God, or if God is good, or if there are secret masters who have power over life and death. Why do they allow people to blindly kill each other in this way, to destroy in a short moment what has been built with great effort over many years? Why let tears and pain come to every home on earth? Many asked me the same question, and they did not immediately understand when I replied, life is a school. The good spirits have not wanted any war, and our evil has brought it about. The gods suffer most from this state of affairs, but what can they do? In nature, there is a law of cause and effect. What we have sown, we shall reap. We must stop the wars. We must order our lives on earth more wisely and better. We must repent and turn back. The gods are powerless. They have given the visible world to us. Genesis says man was made to rule over nature. It means that the spiritual powers do not interfere in our affairs in such a way as to prevent us from doing anything. The gods suffer and speak in our hearts, stop doing evil. They have given power to us, but we surrender control to the wrath of God that is in the hands of the forces of nature, which will see to it that we reap what we sow. As long as we humans do not understand that we are here in life like children who have come here from elsewhere to attend school, we will become bitter and give way to evil. And then our only salvation is not to give up, not to cry out, this world is wretched, the devil rules it, but to make ourselves thoughtful seekers of truth, to meditate, to read, to listen to each other's words. Then we take a step forward and enter the world of the water trial. In our search, we always find something, because the world of the water trial is like an ocean full of currents of ideas. When we open the smallest channel into our soul, ideas immediately flood into us. The more fervently we think about life, the more enchanting ideas flow into our minds, filling our souls with new concepts. The human mind seeks truth in different ways. One way is called scientific research. Those people are clear-sighted, logical thinkers who say to themselves, for example, now I'm going to put all other problems aside and start studying matter as a chemist to come closer to the truth. Another way to seek truth is through open-minded philosophical thinking. Philosophers generally reflect on life, trying to reason out its inner laws and meaning. The third way is the most common. Most people are not strong enough in their minds to dare to think for themselves. They look to others for answers to their questions. This way of searching is religious in the most common sense of the word. How many souls are attracted to the great religions, churches, and sects? Of course, everyone, to become a serious recipient of religion, must have realized that there are mysterious aspects of life, and that one is a weak and ignorant being. Still, the seeker does not have to trouble oneself much with thoughts there. Believe so and so, then you will have peace of mind and understand why things are as they are. Religious people approach the water trial more slowly than the people of science if their religiosity is more a belief in authority than knowledge of God. But suppose their faith is living and personal. In that case, it may carry them further into the middle of the eddies of the water trial than a philosopher's reasoning or a scientist's inquiry into the phenomena of existence. A remarkable fact must be borne in mind. When one becomes an earnest seeker after truth, not only does one's daytime consciousness change, but also the consciousness that appears in sleep. Night consciousness changes. The dream life of the seeker of truth is enriched, fertilized, and enlivened. It can become so real that one steps out of the physical organism while retaining a self-conscious personal sense of self and enters the astral world. One is then the same human being in sleep as in their waking existence. This results from an advanced spiritual development, however. The ordinary person, not even the ordinary seeker of truth, is not so self-conscious in the night life. But outside of the body, one lives the life of the astral world. Therefore, the more sensitive individual always brings impressions of the dream world, even if one doesn't clearly remember anything. While awake, the scientist or the inventor suddenly comes upon something they have long pondered over without knowing where the light came from. A poet gets a wonderful inspiration, an artist a vision, a philosopher a solution to a problem, or a person thinking about a particular issue in their life finds a sudden clarity and enlightenment. All of them, at night, while in that other, invisible spirit world, have consorted with people, angels and divine beings from whom they have received answers to their questions. These answers become inspirations for the day. It is interesting to watch people in their nightlife move through the various places, societies and fraternities to which their soul kinship draws and takes them. There, they receive the teachings of the more experienced. Their nightlife is not wasted if they seek truth in this visible world. There, their intentions become clearer, and thence they bring knowledge to their day consciousness, though they seldom remember it clearly. Thus, the water trial seems to be a very well-intentioned educational and developmental class in the school of life, and we almost ask with curiosity, can this water trial be seen as a temptation at all? Isn't it very good that a person who is a seeker of truth becomes wise in the course of their nightlife? In what way can the water trial become a curse that blinds one, so that one does not see the truth, nor bow down in spirit to life with humility? In two ways, and in both temptations lies pride. Moreover, in both, the individual gives up their quest. The water trial opens up a new world, the free and heavenly realm of thought. One feels happiness while philosophizing, speculating, and building systems. One tastes the manna of pleasure in letting one's thoughts fly to the heights and depths of the mysteries of existence. The more gullible and sanguine one is, the more bitter one's awakening is when the voice of the new consciousness begins to sound amid joy and asks one with a mocking voice, "Are you sure of what you are doing? Are your conclusions correct? Do you know what you think and imagine is true?" Then the fall is near. "Speculations are fantasies," one exclaims. "Dreams are dreams. There is nothing to trust. Human reason is too short to solve eternal problems." And the voice of the temptation whispers, "Nothing can be known. It is foolish to think that divine knowledge is attainable. The truth is that nothing can be known." And the seeker of truth becomes a cynic, a denier, a strident agnostic. The second temptation is the opposite. When the seeker of truth finds solutions, is inspired and invents something new, one feels happiness. The temptation is close at hand to think oneself a wise and advanced individual who has reached the summit of knowledge. One may say to oneself, "I am humble," and in front of people one appears modest, but secretly, perhaps unnoticed, one is convinced of one's knowledge, of the validity of one's views, of the wisdom of one's own words. The more one develops, for example in the nocturnal life, the more one's eyes become blinded, so that one does not see that the astral life, like this physical one, as a symbol, but believes it to be real, perhaps eternal life. And the secret temptation in one's heart is the belief in one's knowledge and high wisdom. Thus one forgets the divinity of life, and placing oneself at the mercy of knowledge, skill and holiness, one becomes a god of the world. One then lets others admire the wisdom that pours out of the truth seeker. However, when one does not allow the water trial to become a temptation in one way or another, and always remembers how limited and small all human achievement is, one can happily pass this trial and win. In a way, victory is the ideal, but at the same time, it is the only practical solution. In the water trial, the seeker of truth wins when one sees through all one's knowledge and solutions, and sees that they are, after all, illusions that arise from within oneself. This is a high and difficult test. It frightens the seeker of truth. One could not understand in the beginning, but in the end one comes to the conclusion that all that one thinks is true is an illusion rising from one's soul. Then one is confronted with a narrow gate, whose guard asks him, "Can you throw off the illusions, remain alone, and stand in the empty space? Can you come out of the sea where you have long lived as a fish, rise to the surface and find yourself as a bird that can fly through the air in space? Can you overcome yourself to see your solitude in the eternal infinite? Are you content to be a living, conscious point in a circle that does not exist and in the center of which you must create the circumference? Can you do this? If you can, you will come out of the water trial and have to deal with the air trial. Then you will enter a new world in your soul where it is no longer a question of feelings and thoughts but of your own will. Do you want?" Chapter 6. A Trial of Air. In the water trial, one starts to know oneself, and this knowing is wisdom, as the ancients used to say. The beginning of wisdom is when the person realizes that one knows nothing. Only when one has come to this point does life open up the possibilities of knowledge. After the water trial comes the new, unknown world of the air trial. But where is the power that lifts the seeker from the darkness of ignorance into the light of knowledge and wisdom? What threshold separates the old scientific, philosophical, and religious world from this new unknown? It can be expressed in a single word, a word that is much misused, and whose meaning is rarely understood, but it is hard to find a better one. That word is faith. One must enter consciously into faith. But what kind of faith? After all, one has believed before. One has been a philosopher, a scientific thinker. And one has always believed in the truth and validity of one's actions. But all those images of the world were broken. In the water trial, one fell into doubt and ultimately into the realization of one's ignorance. What is the faith that is now expected? It is a faith centered on oneself, based on the fact that one has come to know oneself as the center of consciousness in the universe. One's faith is now faith in oneself. But this self is as weak and helpless as a newborn child, and yet at the same time as eternally powerful as a newborn God. One's faith in oneself is therefore like faith in the emptiness of the divine, for one comes to be like an invisible point in the space of infinity. These words mean nothing, yet are full of meaning for the experienced. The one from whom the world of the air trial now expects and demands faith stands on the threshold of one's new life before two paths, one of which must be chosen. The choice is hardly free. One's past guilt and temptation determine it, and easily one takes the left-hand path, which leads to ruin, but just as easily and quickly, the individual may see their mistake, and changing their course, rush to the right. Which is the left, the road of danger? It's that one believes in one's personhood, the mortal self, so to speak. One considers oneself to be, I should say, a divine being who can do and achieve great things and be the center of change in the universe. One wants to be like a god, like a creator, seeking glory and power. One's life is then a progression in this direction. One is the source of life, and one is all in all. Few people think this way. Fortunately, very few. If one starts from this point, deciding to become a god, because there is no other god as far as one knows, one is going down a very sad road. It may give one satisfaction, and the more one goes on, the more life reveals fairy tale possibilities, showing one what strange abilities lie within oneself. One will eventually have to deal with the problem of death itself, and find that death can be overcome by letting go of one's own body, as we mentioned in the water trial. However, seeking one's personal self and satisfaction is a sad road, for it leads one step by step away from human coexistence into ever greater loneliness and desolation. This is the way of a black magician. We can understand this, but at the same time, we know that in practice extremely few people go to the end of the black road, although many go that way to some extent. Many people are power-hungry and ambitious. Many consider glory and power the highest achievement for 1, 2, or maybe 10 lifetimes, but then realize how bleak that ideal is. Then they turn, and their turn is as great as their selfishness has been, so great is their conversion. Life is long-suffering. It abandons no one. It wants no one to perish. Life waits, and the slightest conversion is rejoiced inexpressibly in heaven. One can wander in the direction of selfishness as far as one can go, but fortunately the reaction is so strong, the school of life so wonderful, that one gets tired and turns away from the evil path. It is almost legendary when we speak of black magicians who have become devils in the true sense of the word, and freely chosen to walk towards their damnation. They exist, but they are rare and bitter fruits on the tree of life of humankind, and their lives are shrouded in a great mystery. Most who stray from that path stop to think, make observations, and see where they are headed. Evil only beckons for a while. Therefore, the other world opens up for most people, wherein lies their salvation and eternal bliss. This other way is also faith in the self, not a mortal personality, but an immortal, higher self. It is to believe in goodness, truth, and God, and that good lies in oneself. Life is divine outside human beings, but divine life also lies deep in everyone. Everyone is redeemed, as Christianity says, and that life itself, God, is in everyone. In each of us dreams the true God, not the lower self, but the true God into whose fellowship we must come. We must not mistake God for a being that can be defined in the way of religions. Then again, we will fall into old errors. We must understand that God is infinite life and therefore a mystery, but God is goodness, truth, justice, and beauty. We can speak in an apostolic way about the attributes of God. Still, we need only believe that the living God is in communion with the best of all in our soul. Only the best in us will be saved. Only the best is immortal. In the air trial we must believe either in our little personality and its pride, or in the goodness of life, which has redeemed our souls too. As we go down the wrong road, we sink deeper and deeper into ourselves, only ourselves, we become centered in ourselves. But on the right path, when we believe in life, we strive to get out of ourselves, we strive to live, we strive to receive all the ineffable perfection that is reflected in us at our best. The inner goodness, nobility, honesty, beauty, and righteousness we find in ourselves are faint reflections of the living God. Therefore, along these lines, which arise within ourselves, we seek the living God. This is the air trial, and then there is only the ideal of the air trial, a life of selflessness and love with its joys and sorrows. The air trial will test our will, its sincerity and purity. Since the trials of life run in parallel, a person may be subjected to an air trial of one aspect of their being in which their will is tested, even though one has not yet completed the other trials. The more varied and complex the lives of cultured people, the more easily an individual is tested in many ways simultaneously. We want to say a few words about a stumbling block that is very close to all of us. Even good people fall into it with the best of intentions. What is it? It's a will to improve the world. A well-meaning person looks around and exclaims, "Everywhere there is injustice, sorrow, suffering, and pain. These miserable conditions must be improved. Everything must be changed, fixed." One becomes a politician, as we say. It's almost like a modern morbidity, this politicizing and improving the world. It's not reprehensible or bad. It's a complex problem. And yet the solution is as simple as it is intimate, a solution that suits the individual and groups, classes, and nations. And that solution is in the old familiar phrase, "First sweep clean at your door." Can you heal the world before you have healed yourself? Can you cry out to others, "Be brothers," if you say when a poor man comes to your door asking for help, "We are not a charity, we want to make a difference in the world"? I do not say this in jest, because sincere political work for justice and freedom is always beautiful and honorable. But it is easily misleading. Not just the do-gooders, but others too, especially now after the Great War, think that war is anything but a blessing for humanity. If people lived in peace with each other, happiness would be better guaranteed for the people of Europe, Asia, and the whole world. Everyone agrees on this. The theory is clear, but what about the practice? The League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations, holds its meetings and peace congresses in Europe, where they think and work out how to bring about world peace. It is clear to everyone at the Congress that if there were peace, there would be no need for arms, no cannons, no standing armies, no equipment and preparations for war. But now that there are both armies and weapons everywhere, the question of peace becomes a kind of disarmament question, and then we're in a ditch. When wise representatives are sent to Congress, they know from the inside that world peace must not be affected by anything related to armies and arms. You cannot go that far in madness. Let us talk about things. Let's find a solution that reduces the military, so that so-and-so can keep so-and-so in arms. To strip them completely would be absurd. The people must be armed. You never know when someone will attack a country. My people and my kingdom will not start any war of aggression, but who knows about others? Therefore, we must be armed. It is as if in our private lives we thought, who knows in which house one can live in peace? It's open to all kinds of threats. Hence one has to have a gun for protection, and if one is walking down the street someone might attack. But we would be mad if we doubted our neighbors and other people this way. An individual who would think such a thing is truly mad. And yet our nations think so. What would be madness for the individual is therefore sensible for the nation. But shouldn't what makes sense to the individual also make sense to the community? What is it that makes us as individuals go around without guns, live in houses without machine guns? We believe that others are at peace, just as we are. We trust each other. And if in our trust we are sometimes betrayed, if there are murderers, if there are evildoers, it would be foolish for us to think only of those evildoers. Above all, we must think of others who want as much good as we do, who want peace and a harmonious neighborhood. Mutual trust is the condition and prerequisite of all community life. So, what should be achieved among the people? The natural relationship between individuals should be transformed into a natural universal relationship. We fear and doubt other nations instead of believing good things about them and loving them. Let us imagine that we could get all the people and kingdoms here in Europe to think for a few moments, a month or two. I now renounce all fear, all hatred, all envy, all anger. I want only good. I trust others. I believe and trust that foreign nations and people also want good things. After all, we are all human beings. Murderers and evildoers are only a tiny percentage. The rest of us are peaceful people who would like it to be good and peaceful here on earth. If, for a few months, we all thought, now we want peace on earth and goodwill towards all, then we would be giving glory to God on high. And what could then disturb that peace? Yes, this is a dream that concerns other people. The method is simple, but how is it feasible? That's the question. Every person who wants to pass their air trial correctly should think like this. I understand that peace is the world's lifeblood. Am I prepared in all situations to think, act and behave in a way that contributes to world peace? Then I must first and foremost sweep the front of my door. I must always be full of thoughts of peace and love. I can't have the world-changing spirit in me. There must be peace in me. I think of everyone with love. I extend my good faith to all people. Truth must always be shown, but in a very calm way. This is the truth. He who has eyes, let him see. He who has ears, let him hear. Others will follow suit. Peace spreads to the world on the mysterious wings of faith. Chapter 7. The Secret School of Life. All human beings go to school for life, and the religions of different times have each, in their way, tried to impress this fact on people's minds. Moreover, through their metaphorical experiences, secret societies have pointed to how the school of life is organized. By nature, people don't understand it. They seek joy and happiness in life, and when sadness and adversity confront them, they groan and complain. But religions, especially in the East, have succeeded in teaching people to submit to the dictates of fate, or karma, and to be content while suffering. In contrast, such a fatalism is considered unpalatable in the West, and ways are found to overcome the difficulties, especially in the New World. For decades, America has had an optimistic view of life's troubles. There, Emerson's phrase, blessings in disguise, has become common. Life is good in itself, so its sorrows are good too. They strengthen character, they educate individuals and nations. Both fatalism and optimism are thus based on the belief and view that life is a school with its many trials. One always learns something at school. A person who understands life as a school wants to know what is learned in that school. What is the course of study to be taken there? What is the final examination to be passed? This question is also answered quite unanimously by religions. All sin and evil must be renounced, all good must be pursued. The ideal is human perfection, that is, union with God, which is described in various words and which, according to Oriental doctrines, is achieved after hundreds of incarnations. Life is a cycle from birth to death, and from death to birth, until liberation from the wheel of life is achieved. A thinking person, understanding the program of existence, is not content to passively watch life progress towards perfection. That growth is exceedingly slow, because humanity is pretty much the same today as it was yesterday. The same vices, the same selfish ambitions, the same virtues. A thinking person wants to take an active part in learning their lessons. What will become of a schoolboy if he sits lazily on the bench, at most following the lessons but without reading or practicing anything himself? Is there no self-education system approved by life itself in the school of life? Asks the thoughtful truth seeker. Yes, say the experts, and that school is the secret school of life. Where is that? Who has been there? The secret school of life is nowhere, for it is everywhere. It is within people and has been attended by the wisest and best people who have ever lived on earth, like Jesus and Buddha. A clear distinction must be made between religions and their founders. Religions have historically evolved and mostly away from their foundations. It would be imprudent to determine anything specific about their founders or teachings based on the current manifestations of current religions. To get an idea of the founders, we must carefully study the origins of religions, the original writings and monuments, the original congregations, and even have some spiritual experiences in the secret school of life, that is, through spiritual self-education to obtain some results. But who then is the teacher in the mystery of life? Or is there a teacher at all? Perhaps we have to figure out how to educate ourselves towards perfection. Life is our teacher in the secret school of life. But life is no longer outside us. It is the spirit of life within us. Yet we would be helpless if it were not for the guides and counselors in the secret school of life. These helpers are our human teachers, the very great beings who have completed the course of the secret school. Let us think, for example, of the Buddha. Here comes a hero of the spirit, a wonderful man who says of himself, "I have found the truth. Follow me, and you too will find the truth." As we study further, we find that he gave people clear instructions and advice. Do so and so. Don't do this, don't do that. Then we find out that the Buddha has opened the gates to the secret school of life that he attended. But what about Christianity? The founder of Christianity was Jesus Christ. Did he then also go to the secret school of life? When we study the evangelists of Christendom, we see that Jesus also said of himself, "For this purpose came I into the world, that I might proclaim the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Follow me." Same words as with Buddha. And does he, like the Buddha, advise us on what to do if we follow him? When we study the scriptures, we see clearly that he does. Jesus Christ also opens the doors to the secret school of life. It is just that Christianity has forgotten Jesus' commandment because the world in general ignores the secret school of life and its rigorous self-education. What do we hear too often in the world? We hear not only from ignorant people, but also from those who say they are wise and advanced, that those great souls whom we so readily call masters, sons of God, saviors, etc. with pretty names, are impractical. They are a bit fantasist, believe too much good in people, and think too childishly about this life. I think almost any Christian, whether he's a priest or a bishop, if we put him in a tight spot about Jesus' instructions for living, he says, "Yes, everything in the gospel is beautiful and poetic, comforting and uplifting, but in our society it doesn't apply to everyday life. Anyone can understand what this life would become if we started to imitate Jesus. Great souls are always a little impractical." Wasn't he the Son of God then? We ask, confused. Of course he is, they reply. Is God then impractical? We ask again, and it's a bit of a difficult question. But the truth seeker understands that the wisest people, brought up in the secret school of life, cannot be impractical. On the contrary, they know more about the practicalities of life than we do. Their high purity, extraordinary love and gentleness are more practical than our petty chastity. Otherwise, we would conclude that robbers and evildoers are practical, and all other decent people are impractical. But if we do not admit that the robber is more practical than we are, but certainly believe that we who would not take another's property are more practical and know more about the law of life, we must admit that the greatest, noblest, and most unselfish people have a better knowledge of what is right and what is the actual practice of life. We are too prone to define the practice of life. We want to be involved in the composing and ordering. But life smiles on us. Neither the laws of life nor the art of living are what we in our selfish imagination would like them to be. The will of life, the practice of life, the law of life is what it is, and we must learn to understand and respect it. The secret school of life, whose doors are opened to us by the great sages and which they sometimes call the kingdom of God, nirvana or the brotherhood, is not a school of play. If we want to enter that school, which can only be done voluntarily, we must have one of these wise people as our guide. In practice, we have to solve the philosophical problem of our human freedom. Life is free. We humans love freedom, and we do not suffer any coercion. The school of life is full of freedom because we can do and act as we like, make mistakes, do evil, fall into sin, and be as we want from the point of view of the school of life. But its lesson is that it uncompromisingly allows us to bear the consequences of our actions. There is complete freedom in it, otherwise we would not have in our youth so great and so noble and so sublime a longing for freedom if we did not feel like free beings, bound by nothing in the world. It is a feeling of great freedom in life. Life is patient. We can take whatever path of development we choose. The Father of life is always waiting for his prodigal son to return. But the secret school of life is quite different. There, of our free will, we choose a teacher for ourselves. Now I want to educate myself so that I may enter the kingdom of God and be of greater service, help, and usefulness. So great a being is a human being that one can say to oneself that a human being is not an ape's offspring but is born of God. One can whisper this to one's inner father, I want to educate myself to help others. Then one is ready to enter the secret school of life. There are many advisors at the secret school: Buddha, Zarathustra, Muhammad, Confucius, Lao Tzu, etc. Who do we choose as our teacher? Let us remember an important truth. All are one in the secret school of life. There is only one master, one teacher. Others are representatives of that one. Who is the one? It is the Spirit of life, God, and if we define it more precisely, it is the Son of God, that wonderful consciousness in the inner sanctuary of the heart of humanity, which we call the cosmic Christ. It is called the Logos in the Gospel of John. The wise teachers in the school of life are in this Christ consciousness. They are deeper in that consciousness than others. But we all have the same Christ consciousness. Otherwise we could not understand what the teacher says or educate ourselves, unless we had in us that divine self which is our Saviour, Christ in us, and which we also call the mystical Christ when it is awakened in the individual. If we wish to enter the mystery school of life, what is more natural than that here in Christendom? We should turn to our founder of religion, our own Saviour, and say, what do you, Jesus Christ, teach us? Or better said, what do you advise me? For each one individually enters the secret school of life, and we don't have to wait for an answer in vain. Immediately Jesus says, keep my commandments. I have given my commandments to my disciples, and they have been compiled in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. However, they are not well known in Christendom. Yes, they can be read out loud in churches and meetings, but only as oratory because the Christian Church does not acknowledge that Jesus gave new commandments. Christianity is used to thinking that the commandments given by Moses to the people of Judah are the same as those given by Jesus. This is not to disparage the commandments of Moses, but if we want to accept Jesus as our teacher in the school of life, we must obey his commandments. When we look at the commandments of Jesus, the first of which is do not get angry, we soon see how directly they relate to the various trials of the school of life. Jesus wanted to instruct us with his commandments on how quickly and effectively we could pass the so-called trials. So the first commandment guides us from the labyrinth of the earth trial into the light of truth. We get angry when we think someone is doing something wrong, for example, violating property rights. Jesus says, if you want to pass the earth's trial well and quickly, learn not to be angry in your heart. Learn to be gentle and forgiving. Do not let your heart be attached to this world's treasures and precious things. Don't even think you own your loved ones. Don't get angry. Jesus' second commandment says, "Thou shalt not look on a woman to lust after her." That is, don't be unclean in your thoughts. This clearly concerns the fire trial. We must learn to purify our emotional lives, and the best way to do that is to use meditation exercises to make our thought lives beautiful and pure. In the third commandment, where Jesus says, "Swear not at all," he instructs us to speak the truth and be careful in our promises, lest any harm come unintentionally. We are honest, truthful, and silent. It is better to be quiet than to speak badly. This commandment is related to the water test. Incidentally, there can be no question of entering any secret school unless we are already under the water trial, in the sense that we have become truth seekers. Jesus' fourth commandment, "Thou shalt not be against evil," is connected with the air trial. How can we learn to do something good in life? In what way can we walk the path of white magic other than by giving up doing evil? We don't have to worry in the first place that there is evil in the world. We have to worry about not doing evil ourselves. This is Jesus' command and advice to us. When we give up doing evil ourselves, we simultaneously free the world from evil, lifting it and moving it forward a little. Of course, this is only said to those who want to follow in Jesus' footsteps in the secret school of life. It is not binding on other people. Those who do not go to this secret school of life can be as valiant as they like in their struggle against evil. It is their school of life then. Only the one who goes to the secret school of life does not do or oppose any evil. When the seeker of truth follows these four commandments of Jesus, they naturally come to the fifth commandment, the sum of all, the commandment of love. Love all. Do not regard foreign nations as your enemies. If you have enemies, pray for them if you cannot love them otherwise. Love everyone and remember that all people in all nations are human beings who know how to rejoice and suffer, to love and long for love. When the seeker of truth, while attending the secret school, follows all these precepts as scrupulously and as spiritually as one is able, the day finally dawns when one is, as it is technically called, initiated or received into the company of those beings who constitute the secret circle of life. Then, the truth seeker too will be one of them, one of the chosen ones whose task is to carry the burdens of humanity through the millennia, and to help their brothers and sisters who are groping in the darkness.